This video is entitled Payment for Psychotherapy in Denmark, a primer for expats. It's intended for people who want to know how to get psychology services covered. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how the public system works, what a private psychologist is in comparison to a public psychologist, and how the private insurance functions in order to pay for a psychologist typically. So many folks who move to Denmark are under the mistaken impression that they should get psychology or psychology services for free. That's not true. And here's how the public system works, is that typically what happens is there are a number of conditions or circumstances that are covered by the public system. They include some of the major diagnoses like depression or anxiety, and or if something happens to you, for example, you get robbed or you get attacked somehow, you can also get coverage for recovering from that. If you think that you have a condition that would get covered, the place you start is to go to your general practitioner. Like many services, you have to start there, and they act as a kind of gateway into other services like physical therapy, etc. People sometimes ask, is there a waiting list? Very often there is. It really depends on what's going on or what your condition is. Right now, as I speak in 2021 at the end, there's a mental health crisis in the entire world, and it is pretty hard to get in right away. If all that being said, in terms of a public psychologist, it is one of the cheapest ways to get therapy. And once you get that referral, one thing you can do is you can go to, now it's in Danish, but there's a website, sunhed.dk, and if you go there and it says find a treater, find a behandler, look for psykolog, and it will give you'll have to read a little bit of Danish, but most of it you can pretty easily figure out, and you can choose the gender and all kinds of things, what location, how long the waiting list is, in order to find somebody that you think fits for you. So there are psychologists that function within the public system, and people often ask, why aren't you in the public system? And the reason is that the public system functions like its own insurance, and they have a closed group of psychologists that they have selected to provide those services to the public. It is really hard to get in that group. It's like nearly impossible, particularly if you're in Copenhagen. If you're a rural psychologist and you work in some little town in Jutland, it's not so hard. But there's a lot of competition to be on that list, and most of us won't ever be able to be on that list. So a lot of expats turn to private psychologists, and because they don't want the waiting list, or they want somebody they think understands them, that's not in the public system, or somebody that understands what it's like to be an expat. So most of those people, they go to Facebook or Google, or they get a referral from a friend. That's how you find a private psychologist. We have many of them at our clinic, the Little White House, and I'll give you the information for that at the end of this presentation. So what if it's expensive to see a psychologist, a private psychologist? It generally is. It can cost between 800 and 1,500 krona per hour. And most of the time, people go to a psychologist for at least 6 times. Private insurance can pay for a psychologist, and it really just depends on the kind of plan that you have. There are some plans that have their own network of psychologists. Many of them will let you see any psychologist who has licensure in Denmark. So just so you know, most private insurance plans require that you have the highest level of licensure in Denmark. That is called authorization in Denmark. We call it licensing in the US. It's called authorization here. So you look for an authorized psychologist. Some insurance plans, many of them will let you go to any authorized psychologist and will reimburse you, but you have to pay up front. There are a few that have their own internal networks or work with a sort of middleman in finding a psychologist, and those ones will pay in advance. So you'll have to just ask your insurance about that. One thing you should also be aware of, and I've got a separate video about this, is that there's other kinds of therapist professions in Denmark. There's psychotherapists, there's non-authorized psychologists. If you want to know about that, I'll link that video in the notes to this video. And so thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by the Little White House. It's a clinic of international psychologists that's in Nordvest or Northwest Copenhagen. And please feel free to write. I answer almost all questions about finding a therapist in Denmark. We'll try to help you get hooked up, even if it's not through our clinic.